Here we go. Chapter 25 of A Marvelous Work and Wonder. Yesterday I had a wonderful rant about free will, of course, yet again, because that's one of my passionate subjects, I suppose. Let's see what happens today on the word of wisdom. All right. It is impossible to estimate the good that would result from the world accepting the revelation given by the Lord to his church in this dispensation, through his prophet Joseph Smith at Kirtland, Ohio, on February 27th, 1833, known as the Word of Wisdom. Quote, a word of wisdom for the benefit of the council of the high priests assembled in Kirtland, and the church, and also the saints in Zion. To be sent greeting, not by commandment or constraint, but revelation and the word of wisdom, showing forth the order and will of God in the temporal salvation of all saints in the last days, given for a principle with promise, adapted to the capacity of the weak and the weakest of all saints, who are or can be called saints. Behold, verily thus saith the Lord unto you, in consequence of evils and designs, I love that part, which do and will exist in the hearts of conspiring men in the last days, I have warned you and forewarned you by giving unto you a word of wisdom by revelation, that inasmuch as any man drinketh wine or strong drink among you, behold, it is not good, neither meat in the sight of your Father, only in assembling yourselves together to offer up your sacraments before him. And behold, this should be a wine, a pure wine of the grape of the vine, and of your own make. And again, strong drinks are not for the belly, but for the washing of your bodies. And again, tobacco is not for the body, neither for the belly, and it is not good for man, but is an herb for bruises, and all sick cattle, to be used with judgment and skill. And again, hot drinks are not for the body or belly. And again, verily I say unto you, all wholesome herbs God hath ordained for the constitution, nature, and use of man. Every herb in the season thereof, and every fruit in the season thereof, all these things used with prudence and thanksgiving. Yea, flesh also of beasts and fowls of the air, I, the Lord, have ordained for the use of man with thanksgiving. Nevertheless, they are to be used sparingly. And it is pleasing unto me that they should not be used only in times of winter, or cold, or famine. Now, that's an interesting line in here, because you can think of that saying two different things. One is, so just before it says, hey, the flesh of beasts and fowls of the air, ordained for the use of man with thanksgiving, nevertheless they're to be used sparingly. Okay, so that really sets the stage along that way. That it's, you don't just sit there and so you use meat sparingly. But it says, and it's pleasing to me that they should not be used. You can either say they should not be used only in times of winter or cold or famine. So if you put the emphasis on the syllable in that way, you basically get the idea of, basically you should probably only be using meat in times of winter, cold, or famine. On the other hand, if you put the emphasis on the different syllable in this way, it is, and it's pleasing unto me that they should not be used only in times of winter or of cold or famine. Meaning that you should be able to eat meat when you need to or want to. So beware how you emphasize things. And personally, I think it makes sense that if you eat meat sparingly, that you use it when you would need to or want. So if you want to figure it out one way or another, I don't think it's a huge difference either way, but you can ask the author of it all what he feels about it, if you really feel like you need a definitive answer. All grain is ordained for the use of man and of beasts to be the staff of life, not only for man, but for the beasts of the field and the fowls of heaven, and all wild animals that run or creep on the earth. And these hath God made for the use of man, only in times of famine and excess hunger. Now, isn't that interesting? So, I remember someone commenting about the staff of life. We think of that as like, this is the standard by which you hold on to things. I think someone else pointed out staff of life was just like, hey, at least the bare basics is what it meant. But it's interesting that you can, again, are you ascribing that sentence, all these hath God made for the use of man, only in times of famine and excess hunger, to the aforementioned grain, or the stuff that comes after? So let me read all these paragraphs together. I personally think that it's talking about grain above, because here's why. All grain is ordained for the use of man and beasts to be the staff of life, not only for man, but for beasts of the field and the fowls of heaven, and all the wild animals that run or creep on the earth. And these hath God made for the use of man only in times of famine and excess hunger. So does that mean all wild animals that run or creep on the earth, or does it mean the grain? All grain, but continuing, all grain is good for the food of man, and also the fruit of the vine, which yieldeth fruit, whether in the ground or above the ground. Nevertheless, wheat for man, corn for the ox, oats for the horse, rye for the fowls and for the swine, and for all beasts of the field, and barley for all useful animals, and for mild drinks, and also other grain. And all saints who remember to keep and do these things, walking in obedience to the commandments, shall receive health in their navel, marrow to their bones, and shall find wisdom and great treasures of knowledge, even hidden treasures, and shall run and not be weary, and shall walk and not faint. And I, the Lord, give unto them a promise, that the destroying angel shall pass them by as the children of Israel, and not slay them. Amen. That's Doctrine and Covenants 89, all of it. So that is the word of wisdom. And they're going to be going on about it. This is going to be interesting. Ooh, okay. Yeah, I'm trying to figure out if there's any last comments I want to do. Beasts of the field, wild animals that run and creep on the earth. So basically, I would think that wild animals that run or creep on the earth, these hath God made for the use of man only in times of famine and excess hunger. All grain is good for the food of man, and also of the fruit of the vine. And then he talks about the grain. So, again, if you're trying to find wiggle room on, how you want to have your particular diet, you can find it. It was not structured to be extremely clear, but it was here. I got cats at my feet, so if you hear them, you know what. All right. So, ultimately, to me, when I think of the word of wisdom, the most important things are the ones that come up in the temple interview. So, do you abstain from alcohol, tobacco, any other illegal or illicit drugs? Obviously, if we're talking about alcohol, tobacco, tea, and coffee as stuff that we should avoid, I think most especially alcohol and tobacco. That is so plain and so obvious. Tea and coffee, look, I am not condemning people who drink those because that is so common. Same with alcohol and tobacco too. But it's along the lines of, look, if you're trying to be a member of the church, absolutely give up alcohol and tobacco. It's just good for you. It's better for you. If you're still in our pews, if you're still coming to church and drinking alcohol or smoking, I'm glad you're here. I encourage you to be able to overcome it. Excuse me, buddy. You're on the wrong place. Get. Yeah, you're not supposed to be up there. Thank you. All right. Oh, well, most of all, I think that, what does it come down to? I think if you're a member of the church and you are trying your best, you'll be able to work on, if not completely avoid or never have it be an issue, any of these things in the Word of Wisdom. That being said, I had an older lady in one of my wards. She came to church and she smelled of smoke, and we were always glad to have her. She was a sweet lady. So it's not like I want to turn anyone away or anything, but it's just, come on. I encourage you to do it. I know, especially if you come to the church and you've already had these habits built up, it's hard to quit. And that's why I'm extremely, extremely sympathetic. But the reason I encourage it is just for all that, at least those main things, the health benefits, and it saves money and time and effort. For example, with tea and coffee, there was medical articles that came out way later, obviously, than the Word of Wisdom, that showed that, if you're surviving off of coffee, you have, especially coffee, you have receptors in your brains that fill up over the day, that as they fill up, it makes you feel tired. And you have fluid in the base of your the bottom of right here at your neck, the base of your, top of your spine, base of your spine, base of the head, base of the brain, that each night as you sleep, it comes out and kind of washes and resets everything in your brain. And that helps you feel awake. What caffeine does is it has a molecular receptor that is similar to whatever it was that binds on those ends in your brain that make you feel tired. So that way, because it's a different molecule, it does not make you feel tired, but it bonds to those areas, just like your regular natural molecules do. So that's why it makes you feel awake, because it takes up all those receptors. And so you're like, woohoo, I feel great, I feel awake, wow, and you have all this energy and all that. But your brain needs a reset. And so over time, as you keep flooding your brain with caffeine, it will grow more receptors to tell you you're tired. This is why if you're addicted to coffee, or have had it in your life for a long time, people who, like Garfield, who say they just cannot get up in the morning without their cup of coffee, they mean it. They have literally grown more receptors that tell them that they're tired. And so until they fill up those receptors with more caffeine, they are dragging. So my recommendation, get a lot of good sleep, 7-8 hours, actual 7-8 hours, instead of 6 or 5 like a lot of adults do. And abstain from coffee and energy drinks and other such like that long enough for your brain to let go of all the extra receptors. Anyway, but let's see what the book has to say. You've heard my rants. A temporal spiritual commandment. As the Lord said, the commandment known as the Word of Wisdom was given by the saints by revelation, showing forth the order and will of God in the temporal salvation of all saints in the last days. However, is a temporal commandment with spiritual implications. In an earlier revelation given through the prophet Joseph Smith on September 26th, 1830, the Lord said, "Wherefore verily I say unto you, that all things unto me are spiritual, and not at any time have I given unto you a law which was temporal, neither any man nor children of men, neither Adam your father whom I created. Behold, I gave unto him that he should be an agent unto himself, and I gave unto him a commandment, but no temporal commandment I gave unto him, for my commandments are spiritual. Doctrine and Covenants 29, 34 through 35. President Joseph F. Smith, the president of the church in this dispensation, declared, "You must continue to bear in mind that the temporal and spiritual are blended, and they are not separate. One cannot carry on without the other, so long as we are here in mortality. The work that we are engaged in is not designed to be limited by spiritual necessity of people alone. It is the purpose of God in restoring the gospel and the holy priesthood, not only to benefit the mankind spiritually, but to benefit them temporally. The Lord has made it clear that our bodies are our tabernacles of our spirit. We cannot abuse or offend the body without offending the Creator." I think President Nelson helped continue to clarify, hey, we should be taking care of our bodies. Period. That's end all be all of, if you want still a word of wisdom, not, later turned into kind of a standard and a commandment, but literally just, hey guys, So I remember back in the 90s, there were people who were like, well, if we can't have coffee, does that mean we can't have a Coke because of caffeine? It's like, well, technically no, but to me, it always came down to, what's up, little one? To me, it always came down to what is it that you want out of your life? Is it good for you? And so I actually really don't drink that much soda as an adult, because after being a kid and getting all my sugar high, I realized, this stuff doesn't make me feel good. And so I actually really, is it because it's like, it's forbidden? No. Do we have people who have soda addictions because of swig and the soda shacks and all that? Maybe. I've been to one, and I had one of their really cool sodas. It was nice. Is it something I'm going to do every day? No. Is it super, super duper addicting? No. But that's just not something that appeals to me, because I'm just like, yay, drinking pure syrup that makes my mouth feel like I've chugged honey makes me go, maybe I should not have this all the time. So I drink my soda socially. But, it is, they're playing. It is what it is. If I would suggest, as President Nelson said, just take care of your body. If you are underweight, eat well, eat a balanced diet, get some exercise. If you're overweight, eat well, get some exercise. Make sure you take care of your body in every best way you can. Go out, play, have fun. Do little sports here, maybe biking or whatever you like to do, weightlifting, or play with your kids, etc. Do things that get you up and moving. I think that's just a very simple way of doing it. All right. Evils and designs of conspiring men. The Lord said that he gave this revelation to the church in consequence of evils and designs which do and will exist in the hearts of conspiring men in the last days. What are these evils and designs which do and will exist in the hearts of conspiring men? It must be the tremendous amount of money the Lord saw they would spend in the last days in advertising to induce his children to use the things which are not good for men. Many millions of dollars are spent annually in the United States and other countries of the world to advertise cigarettes and other tobacco products, wine, beer, and other liquors, and coffee and tea, all of which have been proven to be injurious to the body, and all of which the Lord indicated are not good for men. It should be remembered that the Lord, who knows all things, has indicated that inasmuch as any man drinketh wine or strong drink among you, behold, it is not good, that strong drinks are not for the belly, but for the washing of your bodies. The tobacco is not for the body, neither for the belly, and is not good for man, but is an herb for bruises and also cattle, to be used with judgment and skill. That hot drinks, coffee and tea, are not for the body and belly, All these things are but narcotics, which weaken rather than strengthen the body. They are but stimulants and depressants, and yet many millions of dollars are spent in advertising them, and many billions of dollars are spent by consumers for these evil substances. Surely the wisdom of God in giving this revelation to his church cannot be questioned. Obedience to the word of wisdom becomes a temporal salvation to all who observe the Lord's law. In that spirit, surely you shouldn't be questioning it. If you're critical of the church, you'd be like, see, they're trying to control you. And no, they're just trying to point out that if you read it in the context of the whole structure of the ark, they're saying, look, all this has been proven, so doesn't it make sense that God was right? And it's pretty self-evident. That's why would you be questioning? It's like 2 plus 2 is 4, right? No, we should question that. Really? You're still questioning that, are you? Pi is 3.14, at least. It's not 2, it's not 3, it's not 4, it's 3.14. Anyway, so, and frankly, he's right. I think, like I said, because we have that set as a standard now of, hey, abstain from alcohol, tobacco, coffee, and tea. Well, that's the standard. Anything extra from that, which is still in line with what the church wants, is take care of your body. Ta-da! All right, wine and strong drink. Modern medical science and research confirm the Lord's statement that wine or strong drink is not good. Dr. Marvin A. Block, who has served as vice president of the American Medical Society of Alcoholism and as a member of the Committee on Alcoholism and Drug Dependence of the American Medical Association, a renowned lecturer and author of books and articles on alcoholism, has written, because of its social acceptance, alcohol is rarely thought of as a drug, but a drug it is. In scientific fact, it belongs in the category of anesthetics and embodies the same risks and dangerous consequences when abused, as do all other drugs. Ours is a drug-oriented society, largely because of alcohol. In smaller doses, alcohol acts as a sedative. By its action on the brain, it reduces awareness of pain and discomfort, allays fears and calms anxieties, and modifies perception. If more of the drug is consumed, its anesthetic impacts are registered, with deep sleep and unconsciousness and eventual consequence. If the intake is continued over an extended period of time, complete paralysis of the respiratory and circulatory centers occurs, and if persisted in long enough, death will be the ultimate result. The alcoholic beverages used by modern man are many and varied in appearance, taste, and strength, but not in drug effect. What is frequently forgotten or ignored is that they have a common denominator, an unvarying organic chemical substance that, regardless of the vehicle or the concentration in which it is present, has precisely the same drug action. Alcohol itself intoxicates, and this it will unfailing do, in proportion to the amount of ingested, whether in limited volumes of distilled spirits, larger volumes of wine, or still larger volumes of beer or ale. That comes from Alcohol, Man, and Science, a pamphlet by Marvin A. Block, page 10 through 11, and also 2 through 4. So, and frankly, given the social ails that come from it, there's a lot of problems with it too. Like, oh God, I can't remember the statistic. One of the biggest things that makes me grateful I'm a Latter-day Saint, and I've never had any problems with this stuff, is when the statistics come out and say, oh, okay, all these things about sexual assault or suicide, murder, etc., alcohol is almost always involved. It's like 70, 80, 90%, some crazy thing like that. And 90% of statistics are made up on the spot too, so watch out for that. But yeah, it's an incredible amount of things where all this bad choices, regretted decisions, like when ladies go out and have one-night stands and just all sorts of stuff. Alcohol is often involved. And so the question is, like, I am a person who really sides on it is your responsibility. You should take accountability for your actions, and trying to put it off on alcohol, or, oh, I don't remember, I had too much to drink. It was your choice to drink in the first place, wasn't it? It's like, come on. You cannot blame, like, it's weird when you have people who drink a bunch and you can tell that they are a little tipsy, or they're a little more loose in how they act and work with regards to inhibitions, and they've had a couple of drinks, right? But other people, they'll do the same thing, they'll be in the same state, but then the former person will be like, no, I know exactly what I was doing and how I was doing it, and I was good to go, and this is why I got a designated driver, and and they're very accountable, even when they are in that state. And then the other person in the exact same state will sit there and go, oh, but I didn't know what was happening, and it's not my fault, and I didn't mean to. Really? Really? For both men and women, by the way. Like, yeah, it's ridiculous. Then Matthew Perry had an interview where he was very much against, he was debating a guy about accountability when you drink alcohol, right? Matthew Perry was making the idea that the point that it's true, he does everything he can to stay away from and not partake of alcohol. But as soon as he has that alcohol, a lot of stuff kicks in and makes it really hard for him to stop, or the addiction part of his body kicks in. And I agree with him. Absolutely, you should be 100% accountable. But at the same time, if you have built up an addiction, or if you have kind of addiction in your genes or whatever else, then overcoming that, especially if you indulge in it in any way, will be much harder. But to me, I still think it's very possible, because, well, I believe the Lord's word when he says that he will not give you something you're unable to overcome. The question is, even if it's extremely hard, one of the choices you need to make is, are you going to stay at the bottom? Are you going to keep indulging? Are you going to ignore all the signs that says you should walk away and not indulge in that habit? Because if you are dealing with alcoholism and addiction, it's a struggle. Any kind of addiction. Because, we're talking about alcohol and tobacco, but there's pornography addiction too. Or you can be addicted to being angry, where because you get your way, if you're stomping around and you're angry, or you're throwing tantrums, or being manipulative, or you're lying, all of these have social addictions. So whatever your addiction is, maybe it's you want to escape into video games all the time that you don't want to take, whatever you're avoiding responsibility on, you just need to be truly, deeply honest with yourself. Like, do not lie to yourself in any way. You will find some sort of an addiction. Now, I'm not saying you have to give up all video games and become a monk or something. I'm just saying, you need to watch yourself. Like, I would say turn away from anything that changes your physical chemistry, like alcohol, tobacco, coffee, tea, right? But also any social ailments, pornography, anger addiction, manipulation, lying. Obviously those do not have the same physical effect as the drugs, but they are similar in many respects. So if you struggle with any type of addiction, one of the hardest things, one of the biggest temptations is just to give up, because you've tried so many times and you keep failing, and it keeps not working out. And so you have to be able to get past that and keep trying. And it does get easier. It doesn't mean it will be easy, and who knows if it will become easy overall. I think it can. I think that if you continue to try and really put all your effort into it, God will assist, especially if you pray and ask Him to help you escape from your temptations. He'll assist if you truly mean it. On the other hand, if you're just saying, well, I want your help, but really I don't mind if I, indulge a little. How can He help you if that's your attitude? The biggest thing is you have to be deadly honest. All right, let's continue. Perhaps even more devastating than the effects of alcohol on the individual who imbibes it are the effects of alcohol on society in general and those who associate closely with the person who drinks. In 1942, the presidency of the Church of Jesus Christ of Latter-day Saints made the following statements in a general conference of the church. Drink brings cruelty into the home. It walks arm in arm with poverty. Its companions are disease and plague. It puts chastity to flight. It knows neither honesty nor fair dealing. It is a total stranger to truth. It drowns conscience. It is the bodyguard of evil, and it curses all who touches it. Remember my statistics from earlier? Drink has brought more woe and misery and broken more hearts, wrecked more homes and committed more crimes, filled more coffins than all the wars the world has suffered. That's conference, October 1942. The statement concludes with these words. So great is the curse of drink that we should not be held guiltless if we did not call upon all offending saints to forsake and banish it from their lives forever. Tobacco is not for the body. In recent years, a great amount of research has been conducted on the effects of tobacco on the body, and the results of these studies strongly support an announcement made by the Lord that tobacco is not for the body and it is not good for man. Consider the following statements. A host of health organizations, governmental and voluntary here and abroad, have considered the evidence in many cases, have worked to produce the evidence through investigation, and are convinced that the cigarette is a distinct menace to health and life itself. The American Medical Association itself has indicted cigarette smoking as a serious health hazard. Despite the propaganda of the cigarette industry, cigarette smoking has been established as most hazardous. Every regular cigarette smoker is injured, though not in the same degree. Cigarette smoking kills some, makes others lung cripples, gives others far more than their share of illness and loss of workdays. Cigarette smoking is not a gamble. All regular cigarette smokers studied at autopsy show the effects. Medical Bulletin on Tobacco, produced by the American Public Health Association, American Heart Association, American Cancer Association, National Tuberculosis Association, April 1968. Pages 2 through 3. During the decade of 1950 to 60, at various dates, statements based upon the accumulated evidence were issued by a number of organizations. These included the British Medical Research Council, the Cancer Societies of Denmark, Norway, Sweden, Finland, and Netherlands, and the American Cancer Society, the American Heart Association, the Joint Tuberculosis Council of Great Britain, and the Canadian National Department of Health and Welfare. The consensus publicly declared was that smoking is an important health hazard, particularly with respect to lung cancer and cardiovascular disease. Smoking and Health report of the Advisory Committee to the Surgeon General of the Public Health Service, January 1964. 6 times since 1964, the Public Health Service has issued formal reviews of scientific evidence which links cigarette smoking to disease and premature death. Each successive report, including this one, has served to confirm and strengthen the conclusion of the 1964 report that cigarettes are a major cause of death and disease. Health Consequences of Smoking, a report by the Surgeon General, 1972. I mean, what's there to say? Nowadays, there has been so much anti-smoking and restriction of smoking, both in society and in the public, that it's much more of a rarity to walk around and smell smoke on people, at least where I live in Utah. So, not sure how that applies to elsewhere. Frankly, I really don't. Because, there's still bars and other things where I'm sure that are filled with smoke all the time. You've got conservative influencers who love to smoke their cigars. So maybe it's just here in Utah where you go to the grocery store and every once in a while you'll find someone who it's like, oh, they smell like cigarette smoke. So maybe I'm just lucky like that. So I'll keep that in mind. Again, as with wine and strong drink, the effects of smoking are felt by others in addition to the one who indulges in this practice. The Church News section in the Deseret News in Salt Lake City, Utah, published the following editorial, July 12, 1975. The research team of Adams and Williams of Columbia University, making a study of the relationships between traffic accidents and smoking tobacco, came up with some interesting facts. They learned that both high accident and median accident groups, most of the drivers were smokers. In contrast to that, they discovered that the no accident groups studied had relatively few smokers among them, says their report. Data were available with information on the driving accident and violation records of 1,025 male insurance applicants between ages 18 and 25. Most of these young men were students. On the basis of these records, subjects were divided into 3 accident violation groups: a low group, which had no accidents or violations; a high group, whose driving licenses had been suspended or revoked; and a medium group, which had accidents or violations on their records, but not enough for suspension of license. The total sample was divided randomly into subsamples of the equal size to see if the results in one subsample would be confirmed in the second. When the 3 groups were compared as to proportions of smokers in each group, we found the following. In subsample 1, no accident violation group, 18.6 smoked; median accident group, 32.9 smoked; and high accident violation group, 54.3% smoked. In subexample number 2, no accident violation group, 15.9. In subsample number 2, no accident group had 15.9 smoke; medium accident violation group, 25.8 smoked; high accident violation group, 37.5 smoked. The higher proportion of smokers in the high accident violation category is statistically significant. The chi-squared test. If you work in science at all, I have 3 books on statistical analysis of how to produce errors and see if there's significant change, etc., and error bars and all that. It's actually not that hard of a math, but it helps suss out, okay, how much of a difference is this? Anyways, that's what they're talking about. A suggested explanation of the association might begin by noting that nicotine, like alcohol, is a habit-forming drug. The habitual smoker or drinker depends on an agent external to himself, the drug, to attain a desired psychological state. The physiogenic dependence is common denominator of all drug habits. One thing that they did not do, which would have been also more informative to include, is what was the per capita use of alcohol and, well, in this case they're doing tobacco, the tobacco use among all the population that they were studying from. So that way you could see, okay, if, let's say, 20% of the people smoked, then you could kind of expect that in the no, is it concentrated more or less? Because what if it was 10% or maybe 5% of the regular population that they sampled from were smokers? Then that would mean that anytime there was a concentration higher than the per capita, would mean that it's saying that, hey, why is it that this relatively small group is overrepresented in these spots? Kind of makes you show that there's got to be something going on. Now, is it smoking itself that makes you crash your car? No. What it probably does do is indicate that there are other factors that might contribute to that, whether that's a careless attitude because, I don't care, I can smoke, I can drive loose, it doesn't matter. It could be a careless attitude, it could be a subculture of being rebellious, it could be all sorts of things that lend itself to having more accidents in a car. Heavy reliance on drugs may be indicative of overdependency and relates to accident involvement, in that overdependency is the opposite of responsibility, an essential basis of safety consciousness. With this evidence, some insurance companies have compared the driving records of a group of non-smoker life policy holders and comparable group of smokers, and found the results to be similar to the Columbia study. On this basis of this survey, they conducted tests in 2 states which supported the findings and conclusions of their research. They now offer a non-smoker policy in all the states where they do business. Hot drinks, tea, and coffee are not for the body. The Word of Wisdom states, and again, hot drinks are not for the body or the belly. The term hot drinks has been interpreted by the Latter-day Prophets of the Church of Jesus Christ of Latter-day Saints to mean coffee and tea. The harmful effects of these substances have been borne out in recent years in numerous studies, as indicated by the following. To me, coffee is most evident, and tea is along the same lines because it has the same, not exactly the same, but similar effects like caffeine. Like some of them do have caffeine in it from brewing of the tea, and others have, I don't know the other stuff, but it's kind of along those lines. Anyway, Word of Wisdom states, and again, hot drinks are not for the body or the belly. Oh, yep, sorry, read that. Excuse me, madam. People are listening. You can stick around if you want to. Okay, or you can do that. Town and Country magazine recently carried an illuminating article about the harmful effects of coffee. The conclusion of the study, as explained in the article, was, don't drink it. After explaining that coffee causes low blood sugar levels. Oh, really? That I didn't know. Low blood sugar levels. All right. Loss of vitamin B, that would be bad. Skin problems, ulcers, headaches, some heart trouble upsets insulin mechanisms, and that it goes hand in hand with cigarettes and its dangers. The article concludes, what perhaps is the worst thing about coffee that can be deduced from various sources, from nutrition experts to heart specialists, is that, like most stimulants, coffee too can become habitual. Yeah. As I explained earlier about the neuroreceptors. More and more it is required for stimulation and for the daily pickup or lift. This is where the habit becomes pernicious. For while it provides a feeling of well-being, it is merely whipping up an endocrine glands, most usually the adrenal glands, and is thus masking fatigue and other underlying problems that may range from vitamin deficiency to faulty metabolism to emotional depression. It is interesting that Dr. Oglesby Paul, professor of medicine at Northwestern University of Medicine, said about coffee in his book Postgraduate Medicine. In a study of 1,718 men, those who drank 5 or more cups of coffee in a day, it was shown that these men had an increased incidence of angina pectoris and myocardial infarction. Dr. Paul indicated that caffeine has a significant effect on the blood lipids, fats and fat-like substances normally present in the body, and carbohydrate metabolism. He said that several studies have demonstrated an association between the coffee habit and an increase of incidence of coronary disease. Church News, section of the Deseret News, April 14th, 1973, page 16. So there you go. That was then. For me, it's just, do you really want to be addicted to any substance? And I mean any substance. And practically anything. Watch what your addictions are. For me, it's board games. Gotta be careful on that. I slowly accumulate my board games. I can stop anytime, I swear. Just one more game. But it's true, you know. You have your addictions, and you have your hobbies. And like I said, I'm not saying you have to give up on your hobbies, but you just have to be mindful of what you do. A heart attack is an acute obstruction of the blood supply. Don't mess with cords. My cats love being a menace when they're bored. Come here, dearie. Anyway, a heart attack is acute obstruction of the blood supply to the heart. Late last year, Herschel Jakes, get out of there. Late last year, Herschel Jick and his colleagues at Boston University Medical Center reported that 276 patients who had acute heart attacks had drunk more coffee than 1,104 control patients with other diseases. At the time of receiving the word of wisdom, little was known of the composition of tea or coffee. The study of the ingredients of the natural products of the plant kingdom was in its infancy, as indeed was the whole science of chemistry. It was, of course, assumed, since these beverages had some distinct effect upon the body, that they contained some sort of active principle. In 1921, while a white, silky substance, odorless and bitter to the taste, was extracted from coffee and named caffeine. 6 years later, the same substance was found to exist in tea. Thousands of chemical analyses of tea and coffee have been made during the last century. Coffee contains small quantities of several substances of questionable value to man. Tea, in addition to several other somewhat harmful substances, contains 3 to 6% of caffeine and over 10%, at times high as 25%, of tannin. A small quantity of tannin is found in coffee also. A cup of tea or coffee contains about 1 to 1.5 grains of caffeine. Caffeine is a drug, an alkaloid related to some of the most violent of poisons. When it enters the human body, it produces first a feeling of stimulation, followed in due course by a period of depression, relief from which is sought by the use of more caffeine. It is, therefore, habit-forming, and so that with the power of will is weakened. As John A. Woodstow and D.L.E. Woodstow in The Word of Wisdom, A Modern Interpretation. So, yeah, for a long time, the church kind of banged the drum on, we don't do this because of the caffeine. But I think that's kind of a post hoc, hey, we have these studies, it shows that coffee and tea have caffeine in it, so we'll justify it that way, and that bled into the idea of, this is why there were some members of the church who were like, yeah, I don't drink Coke because of the caffeine. I'm like, I got plenty of people who drink Diet Coke all the time. And, there's soda shops, like I said. I'm like, so are you a good member of the church or a bad member of the church? Depending on the temperature of your caffeine is another way I've heard it. It's like, come on, guys. It's more than that. It really comes down to, and this is why why fuss on the particulars? Why be pharisaical? The idea is take care of your body is the general word of wisdom. More specifically, abstain from alcohol, cigarettes, coffee, and tea, specifically. As for soda, that's a personal choice, but I'll tell you what, my personal choice is I don't drink it that much. Just because of the same word of wisdom stuff. I'm not sitting here going, avoid all caffeine, because, what, I'm going to avoid hot chocolate and all chocolate altogether? Well, I don't have much of it just because it's like a luxury. It's like chocolate is more expensive. So it's just, why strain at something that is just very plain? But I understand where the culture came from, but understand where the rules are. The set rules is alcohol, tobacco, coffee, and tea. Ta-da. There you go, that's all. And then if you want to wrestle with the rest, do. It's a good exercise in figuring out how to receive personal revelation. And the big thing you have to be, though, is brutally honest with yourself. Like, don't lie. If you do not lie to yourself, because it's like, yeah, but I really like my soda, or I really like my coffee, or whatever you're struggling with. Yeah, but we understand. I get it, but you gotta be brutally honest. And that way you're open to what God will actually give you. And you can figure it out. And maybe you'll find that you like life in a different way than you're living now. Or maybe you'll find it wasn't as important as you thought. Anyway, have fun debating. Some positive aspects of the word of wisdom. Ooh, you know what? I might need to wait on that. Funny enough. I'm sorry, I've had a lot to say on the commentary of this, but unless I plow through, no. Yeah, okay, it'll be a bit longer, but let's plow through this really fast. Much emphasis has been placed, and rightly so, on the don'ts of the Lord's law of health. The word of wisdom, adherence to the prohibitions of this commandment, helps one avoid taking harmful substances into his body. However, verses 10 through 16 of this revelation give some positive guidelines for maintaining strong, healthy bodies. Let's look now at some of these do's. And again, verily I say unto you, all wholesome herbs God hath ordained for the constitution, nature, and use of man. Every herb in the season thereof, every fruit in the season thereof, all these to be used with prudence and thanksgiving. Yea, flesh also of beasts and the fowls of the air, and I, the Lord, have ordained the use of man with thanksgiving. Nevertheless, they are to be used sparingly. And it is pleasing to me that they should not be used only in times of winter, or cold, or famine. All grain is ordained for the use of man and of beasts, to be the staff of life, not only for man, but of beasts of the field and the fowls of heaven, and all wild animals that run or creep on the earth. And these hath God made for the use of man only in times of famine and excess hunger. Probably talking about bugs. All grain is good for food of man, also for fruit of the vine, that which yieldeth fruit, whether in the ground or above the ground. Nevertheless, wheat for man, etc. A summary of these verses provides us with the following: herbs, vegetables, fruits, meats, and all grains, especially wheat. Modern nutritionists recommend 4 basic food groups as being essential to well-balanced diets: fruits and vegetables, meats, breads, cereals, and milk, thus reinforcing the word of the Lord in this regard. We note also that the Lord admonishes us to eat meat sparingly. In addition, an admonition that is also verified by the findings of science today, since an excess of meat can contribute to cardiovascular diseases. However, he didn't say that man should abstain totally from eating meat. In addition, an earlier revelation he declared, bam, whoso forbiddeth to abstain from meats, that man should not eat the same, or is not ordained of God. For behold, the beasts of the field and fowls of the air are ordained for the use of man. Doctrine and Covenants 49, 18 through 19. The key is found in the word sparingly. Joseph Fielding Smith, 10th President of the Church, declared, we seldom hear of things which are ordained for the constitution, nature, and use of man. The Lord has given us all good herbs, fruits, and grains. These are to be the main foods of men, beasts, and fowls. But we should not overlook the fact that they are to be used with prudence and thanksgiving. In another revelation, section 59, we're told that they are not to be used to excess, neither by extortion. The difficulty with most of the human family is eating too much and failing to heed this counsel. There would be less disease, and mankind would live longer, if all would also heed the counsel of the Lord concerning the use of wholesome foods. Many a man thinks he keeps the word of wisdom, who knows only the don'ts, which are but a part of its meaning. Hence President Nelson saying, just take care of yourself, people. The Lord's promise for keeping the word of wisdom. And all saints who remember to keep and do these sayings, walking in obedience to the commandments, shall receive health in their navel and marrow to their bones, and shall run and not be weary, and shall walk and not faint. Doctrine and Covenants 89, 18 through 20. Latter-day Saints everywhere can bear testimony of the fulfillment of this promise. And what a promise it is! Is there a real parent in all the world who would not want to claim this promise for himself and his children? Those of us who know of its value are humbly grateful to the Lord for having revealed such glorious truths for the guidance and blessing of his people. Since the evidence of the fulfillment of this promise must come from those who have put it to the test, we will refer to Paul C. Kimball, a young Latter-day Saint student who was a Rhodes Scholar at Oxford University in England. At Oxford, he found that most students participating in sports, so he decided to practice rowing. That spring, he rowed a number 5 in one of the fastest boats that raced at Oxford. He found that a boat that entered 6 races and won them all. When he returned to school the following year, he was asked to coach one of the teams. Here we quote from an address in which he described his experience. Quote, one group of young men came to me and said, we'd like you to coach our new crew for rowing. None of us has ever rowed before, but we think you can teach us the rudiments. Truthfully, I felt rather weak at that sort of an offer. I had never done any coaching. However, I accepted their invitation, but said to them, now, if I'm going to coach you, I'm going to have to make you train according to my rules. And I will not have a thing to do with you unless you promise to obey them implicitly. The group said, well, that's all right with us. What are your rules? I said, first of all, "You must stop smoking." They murmured at that and pointed out that they had just left school and apparently thought it would be big if they could smoke. I then said, "Secondly, you must refrain from the use of alcoholics of all kind." Having left their prep school and entered varsity, they believed it was their right to have their pint of beer for lunch. I said, "You must cut it out. You must also stop using tea." Finally, I said, "You must also stop using coffee." That did not hurt them so much because they said that English coffee was more like mud than anything else. No wonder the English hated coffee. That's why they like tea. Anyway, they don't have the American stuff. Sorry, I say that because there's a personality on YouTube called the Spiffing Brit who, that's his big thing, is his tea is a wonderful thing. And he always makes fun of coffee drinkers. And so it's just kind of this playful banter they always have. And since he's in England, I'm like, oh, well, there you go. That's the reason why. Anyways, after the boys had agreed to my training rules, and it took them a week to make the decision, I took them in hand about the middle of October. I worked with them every afternoon for 3 hours till February, when they competed against crews from all the other colleges in Oxford. There were approximately 50 crews in the races. My boys were competing against crews composed of men who had been rowing since they were tiny tots. This group that I had was made up of inexperienced boys. From October to February, those boys trained. Not one of them, so far as I know, used a cigarette during this period. Not one of them had a cup of tea or coffee, or drank any alcoholic drink. Then came the day of the first race. No one thought that they had the remotest chance of victory. The race was on the Thames at Oxford, over a mile and a quarter course. The 2 cannons were fired. Starting the race, every crew went as hard as it could. As coach, I had to run along the bank and shout words of encouragement to my crew through a megaphone. By the time I had gone about half the distance, I was so tired that I could not run much farther. Excuse me, milady. Get out from there. Sorry. He was running a mile and a half. Come on. Thank you. I got delicate stuff up there. I appreciate that. All right. So he was shouting on the side of the bank. By the time I'd gone about half the distance, I was so tired that I could not run much farther. My particular crew had not gained anything, nor had they lost anything thus far during the race. They were just even with the competitors. I thought, well, that's a good thing. I'll give them my last word of counsel and advice and sit down and rest. So I shouted through my megaphone, "Sprint!" They sprinted beautifully and within a minute had stretched out 100 feet between them and their nearest competitor. They won their race by 300 feet and with ease. Everybody said that the next day they'd be beaten. The next day we tried the same tricks and won the race handily. On all 6 days, a race being slated for each day, they won by large margins, but not because they were experts. They were not as finished as a crew as most of the others, nor were they polished in their technique. But the best thing about them was that they had stamina. They had some reserve even after a hard race. These boys won their races overwhelmingly. People came up to me and said, "Mr. Kimball, how did you manage to get such success with that crew? They're just novices, and yet they made better crews look weak." I answered, "I made those boys live right. I made them cut out tobacco, alcohol, tea, and coffee. When the sprint came, their lungs were clean, their systems were clean, their blood was clean, and their nerves were strong." Paul took another group the next year with the same results. Then he had an opportunity to help coach Oxford's swimming team for 2 years and saw men victorious both years. And then he added, "I saw success come so many times from living the word of wisdom that nothing can change my belief in its value." That was from an address in the Salt Lake Tabernacle, May 24th, 1931. "Truly did the Lord say, and shall run and not be weary, and shall walk and not faint." Doctrine and Covenants 89:20. Quote, "My experience has shown that tobacco slows up the reflexes of athletes and lowers their morale. It does nothing constructive. Athletes who smoke are the careless type and do not have the best interests of their team at heart." That's Knut Rockne, coach of the Notre Dame University. "During my 20 years in the big leagues, I've seen the careers of several promising young ball players ruined by the use of tobacco. Cigarettes are very bad, and my advice is to let them alone." Walter Johnson, famous baseball pitcher. "No boy can become a star athlete and use tobacco in any form, because it shortens his breath and affects his heart." Charles Paddock, the sprinter. Testimonies of similar nature can be found in all the homes of Latter-day Saints who observe this law of health. wisdom and great treasures of knowledge. The word of wisdom contains 2 more promises, and shall find wisdom and great treasures of knowledge, even hidden treasures. Doctrine and Covenants 89:19. Visit with Latter-day Saints and see how many of them have a personal testimony that God lives, and that Jesus is the Christ, the Redeemer of the world, that God hears and answers prayers, and that Joseph Smith was the Lord's prophet of this dispensation. And you will realize that the Lord has given unto them the word, given them wisdom and great treasures of knowledge, even hidden treasures. These hidden treasures of knowledge account for tens of thousands of Latter-day Saints who willingly and eagerly fill missions for the church for an average period of 2 years, paying their own expenses and receiving no remuneration therefor. Man cannot put such love for the Lord and his work into the human heart. It must come from God. The health statistics in the Latter-day Saints, which are discussed in chapter 27, are further evidences that the Lord is fulfilling his promise unto his people. And I, the Lord, give unto them a promise, that the destroying angel should pass by them, as the children of Israel, and not slay them. Doctrine and Covenants 89:21. The human body, a temple of God. The Apostle Paul understood the importance of keeping our bodies clean, since they are the temples of the Holy Ghost. Quote, "What, know ye not that your body is the temple of the Holy Ghost, which is in you, which ye have of God, and ye are not your own? For ye are bought with a price. Therefore glorify God in your body and in your spirit, which are God's." 1 Corinthians 6:19-20. Next quote, "Know ye not that you are the temple of God, and that the Spirit of God dwelleth in you? If any man defile the temple of God, him shall God destroy. For the temple of God is holy, which temple ye are." 1 Corinthians 3:16-17. There are many who think their bodies are their own, and that they can do with them what they will. However, Paul makes it plain that they are not their own, for they are bought with a price. And if any man defile the temple of God, him shall God destroy. For the temple of God is holy, which temple ye are. In the light of the terrible waste of money for the use of these harmful substances, the injury to the human body through their use, and the spiritual uplift that comes to those who keep their bodies clean through abstaining from their use, how can one question the source whence this revelation, the word of wisdom, came? It was far ahead of the scientific thought of its day. It must have, and did, come from God. The things that the Lord revealed to the prophet Joseph Smith in the word of wisdom as not being good for man, wine and strong drinks, tobacco and hot drinks, tea and coffee, are all habit-forming, and many men and women are greater slaves thereto than were the Israelites to the Egyptians. Nothing that the Lord has given that nourishes our bodies is habit-forming. In connection with the word of wisdom, therefore, emphasis is given to the words of Jesus. "And ye shall know the truth, and the truth shall make you free." John 8:32. It's awesome stuff. It really is. I know, so some people like to criticize the word of wisdom for 2 main things: how it was brought about, and how it changed from being just like practical advice to being a commandment. And you may have heard my small rants on that, so I'll keep this short. The critical eye to the church will sit there and say, "Oh, this is just because Emma was complaining about cleaning up tobacco juice from the school of the prophets. And so is it really revelation? It was just someone harping on her husband and him coming back and saying, okay, see, huh?" That's a very, very critical view of it. If you think about the pattern of prophets throughout all time, Moses included, oftentimes that's exactly how revelation is received, is that you continue on with what you're doing and what the Lord has commanded. You run into a problem, and then you need to figure that out with God. There are so many things that have just come to mind. Okay, so Moses, in trying to administer as the prophet, learning to call other people to assist him so everyone isn't just waiting in a big line. And his father-in-law Jethro helped him out with that. Does that mean Moses wasn't a prophet? No, it means that you can get insight from all these different places, and then you can get the rest of the information from God, or fulfill the information from God. What about the brother of Jared? Brother of Jared, how am I going to light the barges that we're going to be in? You know, the Lord had him come up with his own idea and then come back with more. Are you seriously? Oh, wow. And then you have Nephi, how to build a boat. You have all these prophets. Whenever a problem arises, it wasn't in the scriptures before because it wasn't a big thing. Now it's a big thing. They need revelation from God. They go to him. Okay, it's a problem for this. It's a problem for that. How are we supposed to take care of this or that? Why do we have water instead of wine for our sacrament? Same thing. The problems that have come up, whether it was, here comes the word of wisdom, plus there was all sorts of questions about where are we going to source the wine from? I don't want to be poisoned as a church. And then it's like, oh, between all these, we're just switching to water, and that's okay. And then so it's all in line with how it's always been done with prophets. It's how God teaches. That's how I would go about answering that. The other criticality is saying that, well, this was just a word of wisdom. It wasn't supposed to be a commandment, but now it is. And that's just because they're tightwads after Joseph Smith. It's like, look, do you believe that God had reestablished his church? Do you think the apostles were true apostles after Jesus Christ left? Or do you think it's a one and done thing? Whoever's the starter of it all, and that's it? Come on. Do you believe in a lot of the New Testament? Because if you don't, because it's not Jesus, it's up to you. But it's to show the fact that just because the later apostles have come along doesn't mean that the revelation is done or gone or it's all over. It just means that we usually get more administrative, more cultural shifts, more, let's get things moving, changing, rolling forward programs, instead of sitting here saying, well, thus saith God, here's all this restored stuff. There are times where that still happens. Look at the end of Doctrine and Covenants. Joseph F. Smith or Fielding Smith, can't remember which, was the ones that had their own experience of seeing the spirit world more in detail. And that's in the Doctrine and Covenants too. These prophets still see and receive and get revelation. But it's probably going to be a lot more minor now that all the main foundational stuff has been put in place. Doesn't mean that, but if you actually just listen to their conference talks, you can tell they're still working with us in what we need nowadays. And yeah, things culturally shift and emphasize different things. And they'll continue to do that in the future as needs arise. So it's changing from being just a word of wisdom to being a commandment and being part of like the temple interview. So what? To me, it's along the lines of, are we going to take seriously the advice that God gives us? And it's all part of the same progression of, the temple ordinance has, the structure of it has changed. The covenants, the main points, the main covenants, and the main things that you promise have all stayed the same, which is the most important part. But they've cut it down a lot so that we can get more work done for those who passed on. The work is hastening. Does that mean, it's all, it's no longer valid because Joseph Smith wasn't around? Come on, guys. Come on. Those are all good debates you can get into later. But most of all, the word of wisdom is really a great word of wisdom for both positive, the negative parts, the positive parts, the things you do, the things you don't do, all important. And I hope it helps keep the Spirit of God with you.